My husband's phone slid into his pocket without ending the call, and I heard more than just fabric rustling. I heard the giggle of my best friend and the cold voice of the man I loved for 7 years telling her to wait until I signed the remortgage papers for $200,000. They thought they were writing the first chapter of their fairy tale, but they had actually just signed their death warrants. I am Natalie Vance, a 32-year-old forensic audit specialist, and tonight I was the ghost haunting the sterile corridors of St. Jude Hospital. Outside, the relentless Seattle rain battered against the glass, drowning out the city noise. But inside, the air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and the electric hum of anxiety. I stood motionless in front of delivery room 405. While other visitors in the maternity ward rushed past me clutching bouquets of pink lilies or oversized teddy bears, I held nothing but a thick black leather folder pressed tight against my chest. It contained no well wishes. It contained the systematic destruction of 2 lives. Through the narrow observation window, the scene inside played out like a silent film of domestic bliss, though the muffled sounds filtered through the door. The rhythmic beeping of the fetal monitor provided a steady, mechanical tempo to the drama unfolding within. Chloe lay on the bed, her face flushed and twisted in pain, gripping the rails as another contraction seized her body. "It hurts. Liam, it hurts so much," Chloe whimpered, her voice cracking with the strain. Liam, the man who had sworn his vows to me 7 years ago, leaned over her. He wiped a sheen of sweat from her forehead with a tenderness he used to reserve for me. He looked every bit the doting father, the devoted partner, completely unaware that his legal wife was standing 10 feet away, watching him perform behind glass. "I know, baby." "I know it hurts," Liam cooed, brushing a strand of damp hair from her face. "Just breathe. You are doing so great. We are almost there. Think about our fresh start, a month ago. Witnessing this intimacy might have broken me. I might have slid down this wall in a puddle of tears, gasping for air. But tonight, I felt nothing but the icy, clinical detachment of a hunter waiting in the brush. My heart did not race. My hands did not shake. I was a professional trained to find the rot hidden deep within financial ledgers, and I viewed this scene not as a heartbreak, but as the final piece of evidence in a long, complex investigation. The irony was so rich it tasted metallic in my mouth. That woman in the bed was not just a mistress. Chloe was the sister of my soul. She was the one who held me upright at my mother's funeral when my knees gave out. She was the one who swore she would kill any man who ever hurt me. Now, she was stealing my husband and birthing a future on the ruins of my marriage. They thought they were building a new life, but they were merely digging a grave. I glanced at my watch. It was 11:45 at night. The doctor had just rushed into the room, snapping on latex gloves. The crescendo was approaching. I was not here to stop the birth. I was here to ensure the aftermath was catastrophic. I remembered the phone call from 5 months ago, the catalyst that had turned my blood to ice. I could still hear the rustle of fabric as Liam slid his phone into his pocket without hanging up. I could still hear his voice, dripping with malice. "Just wait until that idiot signs the remortgage papers. Next week we will have enough cash to vanish before you start showing." That sentence had killed the old Natalie. It had birthed a judge, jury, and executioner. A nurse walking the night shift paused as she passed me, noticing my rigid posture and the dark, ominous file in my arms. She looked concerned. I turned to her, my face a mask of terrifying calm. I did not scowl. I did not cry. Instead, I offered her a smile. It was razor sharp, a surgical incision of a smile that did not reach my eyes. "Ma'am, are you family?" the nurse asked, hesitating. "Oh, yes," I replied, my voice smooth and low. "I am the family they never saw coming." I gripped the cold metal of the door handle. It was time to go to work. 5 months earlier, the air in our high-rise apartment had felt different. It was lighter, filled with the naive warmth of a happy home. I remembered standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights of Seattle flicker to life, waiting for Liam to come home for dinner. I had prepared his favorite roast, unaware that the meat would go cold and untouched. My phone buzzed on the granite countertop. It was Liam. I picked up, smiling instinctively at his picture on the screen. "Hey, babe!" Liam's voice came through, rich with that syrupy affection I had addicted myself to for 7 years. "I am so sorry. But this meeting with the developers is running long. You know how these guys are. They just won't sign off on the blueprints." "It is okay," I replied, fighting back a small pang of disappointment. "I will keep dinner warm. Do not work too hard. You are the best. I love you. Nat. Go to sleep. I will be late." "Love you too," I said. I pulled the phone away from my ear, my thumb hovering over the red end call button, but before I could press it, I heard a sharp rustling noise. He had not hung up. The phone had slipped into his pocket, the fabric of his jacket scraping against the microphone like static interference. I was about to shout his name, to tell him the line was still open, when a sound froze the blood in my veins. It was a laugh, not just any laugh, but a throaty, musical giggle that I had heard over coffee dates, shopping trips, and late-night wine sessions for a decade. It was Chloe. Then came Liam's voice, but the warmth was gone. It was replaced by a cold, sneering tone I had never heard directed at anyone but his worst enemies. "Just wait until that idiot signs the remortgage papers next week," Liam said, his voice muffled but terrifyingly audible. "We will have enough cash to vanish before you start showing." The world did not spin. It stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Remortgage papers. He had been pushing me for weeks to take a loan out on the Victorian home I had inherited from my grandmother, claiming we needed the liquid capital for his firm's expansion. $200,000. That was the number he had thrown around. He was not expanding his business. He was liquidating my legacy to fund an escape with my best friend. A primal scream built in my throat, hot and acidic. I wanted to hurl the phone against the wall. I wanted to smash the expensive vase on the table. I wanted to drive to wherever they were and tear them apart. But as my hand trembled, a switch flipped in the back of my brain. It was the same switch that activated when I found a discrepancy in a corporate ledger. The emotional wife began to recede, and the forensic auditor stepped forward. Evidence. I needed evidence. I did not hang up. I did not scream. My hands, suddenly steady and cold, reached for my iPad on the counter. I synced it to my phone's audio feed and hit the record button. "Are you sure she will sign?" Chloe asked. "I mean, 200,000 is a lot of money. Liam, what if she hesitates?" "She won't," Liam scoffed. "Natalie is desperate to make me happy. She thinks this investment will secure our future. She is so malleable when it comes to me. God, she is so dry." Chloe sighed, and I could hear the smirk in her voice. "I honestly do not know how you survived 7 years of that. She is just numbers and rules. She does not know how to be a real woman for you." "That is why I have you," Liam replied, his voice dropping to a murmur. "Once we get that money, we are gone. Mexico. Maybe. Somewhere she can never find us." I stood there in the center of my beautiful, lie-filled living room for 45 minutes. I listened to them order champagne. I listened to them mock my taste in clothes, my work ethic, my trust. I listened until the battery on Liam's phone finally died and the line went dead. I did not cry. The tears had evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I sat down on the floor in the dark, the city lights casting long shadows across the room. I was no longer Natalie the wife. I was Natalie the auditor. And I had just opened the most important case of my career. I was going to balance this ledger, and the cost they would pay was going to be absolute. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I opened my laptop and turned my dining room table into a war room. For years, I had treated my marriage like a charity, never questioning the expenses because I made enough money to paper over the cracks. But now, as the city slept outside my window, I looked at the ledger of my life with the ruthless, microscopic eyes of a forensic accountant. The emotional wife was gone, replaced by an auditor looking for fraud. And the fraud was everywhere. I started with Liam, my husband, the visionary architect. He always played the role of the tortured artist perfectly, constantly on the verge of a big breakthrough that never quite materialized. He contributed perhaps 20% to our household income, yet he walked around with the entitlement of a king. I realized now that his lean months were not due to a lack of clients, but due to a hemorrhaging of cash that I had been too busy to notice. Then there was Chloe, my best friend since our sophomore year of college. The memory of her sitting on this very sofa, crying about her bad luck with men, made my stomach turn. She was always the victim. She was always short on rent. Nat. Could you spot me $300? My landlord is being a complete jerk about the late fee. I swear I will pay you back next week, she would say, looking at me with those big, teary doe eyes. I always transferred the money. I never asked for it back. I was funding the woman who was sleeping with my husband. I pulled up the credit card statements from the last 12 months. The red flags were not just waving, they were screaming. There were cash withdrawals of $200 at a gas station near Chloe's apartment. There were charges for dinners for two at a high-end steakhouse in downtown Seattle on Tuesdays nights when Liam claimed he was pulling an all-nighter at the studio. I opened my calendar and cross-referenced his schedule with Chloe's social media archives. June 12th, Liam's site inspection in Portland for the Henderson Project. June 12th, Chloe solo spa weekend in Oregon self-care. They were not even trying to be clever. They were sloppy. They relied entirely on my blind trust to cover their tracks. But the smoking gun was yet to come. I logged into the security system for my family's vacation cabin near Lake Chelan. It was a property I had inherited from my grandmother, a quiet sanctuary I had not visited in over 6 months because I was too busy working to pay for Liam's lifestyle. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then I clicked on the cloud storage footage. There they were. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago. Liam was unlocking the front door with his my key. Chloe walked in behind him, laughing, carrying a bag of groceries. I watched, frozen in horror, as they settled onto the porch swing. Liam was pouring a bottle of vintage Cabernet that I had been saving for our 10th anniversary. "Do you think she suspects anything?" Chloe asked on the recording, her voice tinny through the speakers as she snuggled into his chest. "Natalie, please?" "She is too busy staring at spreadsheets to notice her husband is missing," Liam replied, kissing the top of her head. "She is just a bank account. Babe, you are the prize." The pain that hit me then was not sharp. It was heavy and suffocating. It was a profound sense of disgust. They were not just betraying me emotionally. They were parasites. They were eating my food. They were sleeping in my bed. They were using the heat and electricity I paid for to fuel their affair. I had been their host, their banker, and their fool. "You want a spreadsheet?" "Liam," I whispered to the empty room, my voice trembling with a cold, quiet rage. "I will give you a spreadsheet." A normal reaction would be to scream, to print these photos, throw them in his face the moment he walked through the door, and demand a divorce. But as I watched them toast with my wine, I realized that was not enough. If I confronted them now, Liam would play the victim. He would beg. He would ask for alimony. They would walk away together. Perhaps poor, but free. No, that was too easy. I needed them to commit a felony. On the phone, they had discussed fraud using a remortgage on my house to steal cash. If I stopped them now, they were just adulterers. If I let them proceed, if I let them sign those papers and attempt to take the money, they would be criminals. I closed the laptop. The tears were gone. My heartbeat slowed to a steady, rhythmic thrum. I was not going to save my marriage. I was going to feed this case until it was fat enough to slaughter. I was going to let them think they were winning until the very second the handcuffs clicked. Enjoy the wine, Chloe, I said to the dark screen. It will be the last expensive thing you ever taste. I locked myself in the study for the next 3 days, taking sick leave from the firm. I told Liam I had a severe migraine, which was the only lie I had told him in 7 years, while he had built a cathedral of deceit. I was not resting. I was auditing the most corrupt corporation I had ever encountered my own life. I started with the finances. I pulled my credit report, a document I usually checked once a year, but this time I went through it line by line. My eyes widened when I saw a credit account I did not recognize. It was a platinum card opened 6 months ago under my name, with a limit of $50,000. What the hell? I whispered to the empty room, my finger trembling on the mouse. I clicked on the transaction history. It was maxed out, $50,000 of debt, all signed for with a forgery of my signature that was good enough to pass a casual glance but laughable to a forensic expert. The charges were nauseating. A diamond tennis bracelet from Tiffany's, a weekend suite at the Four Seasons, designer maternity wear. Liam had not just stolen my money, he had stolen my identity to pamper his mistress. But the financial theft was just the beginning. I logged into my health insurance portal. As the primary policyholder, I had access to all claims. I scrolled down and froze. There was a dependent listed I had never authorized, Chloe Vance, listed as cousin. You have got to be kidding me, I hissed through gritted teeth. Liam had forged documents to add her to my policy. I clicked on the claims. Prenatal checkups, ultrasounds, blood work. I was literally paying for the health of the woman carrying the child intended to replace me. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. I needed to go deeper. I needed to understand the timeline. I went down to the basement where we kept our old files. I dug through dusty boxes of Liam's pre-marriage records, things we had moved in when we bought the house and never looked at again. I was looking for financial patterns, perhaps old debts he was hiding. But I found something far more volatile. I found a manila envelope from a sports medicine clinic in Chicago, dated 10 years ago. It was from before we met, back when Liam played semi-pro rugby. I opened the folder. It was a surgical report following a severe groin injury. I read the surgeon's notes, translating the medical jargon in my head as I went. Testicular trauma, bilateral vasal obstruction, and then the conclusion. Typed in stark black ink, diagnosis obstructive azoospermia, prognosis, permanent sterility, corrective surgery declined by patient. I sat back on the cold concrete floor, the paper shaking in my hand. The air left my lungs. No, that cannot be right, I murmured, reading it again. I checked the date. I checked the patient name. It was definitely Liam. According to this medical fact, Liam could not father children. He had 0 sperm count. The damage was irreversible without major surgery, which the file clearly stated he never had. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Liam was strutting around, puffing his chest out, planning to steal my house and my money because he believed he was finally becoming a father. He believed Chloe was carrying his legacy. He was destroying his life, his reputation, and his marriage for a miracle baby. But miracles do not happen in biology. She is lying to him, I said aloud, a cold smile slowly spreading across my face. Oh, Liam, you pathetic, gullible fool. She is playing you. If Liam was sterile, the baby in Chloe's belly belonged to someone else. Chloe was not just cheating on me with my husband. She was cheating on my husband with another man. She needed Liam to fund her life, to be the safe harbor, while someone else had planted the seed. This was it. This was the nuclear bomb. I could walk upstairs right now and throw this paper in his face. It would end the affair instantly. Liam would be crushed. He would probably beg for my forgiveness. I carefully placed the document back into the envelope and slid it into my personal safe, locking it tight. "Not yet," I whispered, feeling a surge of dark power coursing through my veins. "I will not save you today, Liam. I will let you burn your life to the ground first. I would let him sign the papers. I would let him humiliate me. I would let him think he had won everything. And then, when he was standing on top of the world, holding that baby he thought was his, I would show him that he was holding nothing but another man's sin. The devastation would be absolute." Knowing that Liam was shooting blanks was a powerful weapon, but it was incomplete. To truly twist the knife, I needed a name. I needed to know who had actually planted the seed that my husband was watering with my money. I turned my attention back to the financial trail, specifically Chloe's bank statements, which I had accessed through the shared cloud account she had foolishly linked to my family plan iPad. Her income was sporadic, mostly tips from bartending and the handouts I gave her. But then I noticed a pattern. On the first of every month for the last 4 months, there was a wire transfer of $5,000. The sender was listed as Vanguard Holdings, LLC. "Who are you?" I muttered to myself, typing the company name into the state corporate registry database. It took me less than 10 minutes to pierce the corporate veil. Vanguard Holdings was a shell company registered in Delaware, but the principal officer was listed clearly. My breath hitched in my throat. "Julian Vance." I sat back in my chair, staring at the name in disbelief. Julian was Liam's older half-brother. He was everything Liam was not: successful, wealthy, and ruthlessly arrogant. Liam hated him with a burning passion, constantly complaining that Julian looked down on him, and Julian treated Liam like an embarrassing stain on the family reputation. The picture was coming into focus, and it was grotesque. Chloe was sleeping with the one man my husband envied most in the world. I needed physical proof. I checked Chloe's location history. She was at a high-end coffee shop in the financial district, a place she could never afford on her own. I grabbed my camera, a high-resolution DSLR I used for site inspections, and drove downtown. I parked across the street and waited. 20 minutes later, a sleek black sedan pulled up. Julian stepped out, looking impeccable in a tailored suit. He did not look happy. He stormed into the cafe and sat opposite Chloe. I zoomed in with my lens, capturing every expression. Chloe was crying, or at least pretending to. Julian looked furious. I rolled down my window slightly to listen, but the traffic was too loud. I did not need audio to understand body language, but I needed to be sure. I waited until they left. As Julian marched back to his car, I saw Chloe grab his arm. He shook her off violently and handed her a thick white envelope. "Do not call me again," I imagined him saying. Later that night, I decrypted Chloe's emails. Since she was using my old laptop, which I had given her last year, she had never bothered to wipe the admin access. I found the thread with Julian immediately. "I need more money. Julian, the baby needs things." Chloe had written 2 days ago. Julian's reply was cold and legalistic. "I sent the $5,000. That is the agreement. You deal with the kid. You have Liam for the day-to-day nonsense. Do not threaten me, Chloe. If my wife finds out about this, I will cut you off completely. Stick to the plan. Let Liam play daddy." I read the email 3 times. Chloe was not just a cheater. She was a master manipulator. She had double-dipped. She had slept with the wealthy brother for the thrill and the cash. But when she got pregnant, she knew Julian, who was married into a powerful political family, would never leave his wife for her. So, she pinned the baby on Liam, the gullible, safe option who was desperate to prove his virility. "You are evil," I whispered, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "You are actually evil." I saved the emails. I printed the photos of their meeting. I now held a hand of cards that could not just win the game, but could burn down the entire casino. Liam was destroying his marriage for a child that belonged to the brother he hated. Julian was paying hush money to protect a political marriage that was likely loveless. And Chloe was playing them both, thinking she was the smartest person in the room. I looked at the photo of Julian's face, twisted in annoyance. "Welcome to the party, Julian," I said to the photo. "You have no idea what is coming for you." I bypassed the receptionist at Vanguard Holdings by flashing a fake appointment confirmation on my phone and walked straight into the corner office. Julian looked up from his paperwork, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion when he saw it was me. He started to open his mouth to dismiss me, but I tossed the manila envelope onto his pristine mahogany desk before he could speak. It slid across the polished surface and stopped right in front of his hands. "What is this?" Julian asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "I am busy. Natalie, if Liam sent you to beg for a loan again, tell him to grow a spine and ask me himself." "Open it," I commanded, my voice devoid of emotion. He hesitated, then ripped open the seal. As he shuffled through the photos of him and Chloe and the printouts of his hush money transfers, his face drained of color. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on a trap door. "If your wife sees these, your political aspirations are dead," I said, leaning forward, placing my hands on his desk. "And if the press finds out you are paying your brother's mistress to keep quiet about your illegitimate child, you will be a pariah by lunch." I did not mean for this to happen," Julian stammered, loosening his tie. "She told me she was on birth control." "Natalie, listen to me. You cannot tell anyone. What do you want, money? I do not want your money." "Julian, I have enough of my own," I replied coldly. "I want a cheek swab. Right now." I pulled a DNA collection kit from my purse. Julian looked at it, then at me, realizing he had no leverage. He was a coward wrapped in an expensive suit. He swabbed his cheek with trembling hands. 2 days later, the lab results confirmed what I already knew. Probability of paternity was 99.9%. Liam was about to raise his brother's child, and neither of them knew it yet. With the truth secured in my safe, I returned home and began the performance of a lifetime. I needed Liam to believe he had won. I needed him to believe I was the submissive, clueless wife he described to his mistress. "I have been thinking about what you said. Liam," I told him over dinner that night, forcing a shy smile, "about the remortgage. You are right. We should invest in your firm. I am ready to sign the papers." Liam's eyes lit up with predatory greed. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Oh, Nat." "You are making the right choice," he said, his voice thick with false sincerity. "This is going to change everything for us. I promise you won't regret it." "I know," I whispered, staring at his neck and imagining a noose tightening. "I trust you completely." While Liam was busy celebrating his victory, I was effectively gutting our finances from the inside out. As a forensic accountant, I knew exactly how to move assets legally but quietly. I transferred my inheritance and savings into irrevocable trusts that required my signature for any withdrawal, effectively locking them away from marital property claims. I moved the liquid cash into offshore accounts that would take months to subpoena. By the time I was done, our joint accounts were hollow shells, containing only enough to pay the electricity bill. The remortgage papers he was so eager for me to sign had a clause I had inserted in fine print, stating that the debt obligation was solely the responsibility of the primary applicant, him. To seal the trap, I turned my attention to Chloe. I sent a gift basket to her apartment, filled with high-end baby products and a handwritten note. "To my dearest Chloe, I know things have been distant lately, but I want to be the supportive friend you deserve. Can't wait to meet the little one." It was psychological warfare. Chloe texted me back almost immediately, overflowing with fake gratitude. "You are the best, Nat." I felt so bad. "Thank you for being so understanding." She thought I was desperate to keep her friendship. She thought I was a doormat. Her guard dropped completely. She and Liam grew sloppy, texting openly, meeting more frequently, convinced that the idiot wife was finally falling into line. Meanwhile, I was sitting in a quiet conference room with a private investigator and a detective from the fraud division. On the table were the forged credit card applications and the fraudulent insurance claims. "This is airtight. Mrs. Vance," the detective said, reviewing the file. "Identity theft, insurance fraud, wire fraud. We can pick them up any time." "Not yet," I said, checking the calendar. "Her due date is in 3 weeks. I want them to feel safe. I want them to think they have gotten away with it. We wait until the baby is born." I walked out of the police station into the cool night air. The net was woven. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was wait for the prey to walk in. As the due date approached, the tension in our penthouse became suffocating. Liam was no longer the charming husband. He was a desperate animal pacing a cage. He needed that money before the baby arrived, and his patience had evaporated. He stopped asking me to sign the papers and started demanding it. He would slam doors, criticize my cooking, and make passive-aggressive comments about how I was holding back his potential. On Tuesday evening, he slapped a stack of documents onto the kitchen island while I was cutting vegetables. "I am done waiting!" "Natalie!" Liam snapped, his eyes wild and bloodshot. "We need to secure this funding for the firm by tomorrow, or the deal falls through." "Just sign the damn papers." "Why do you have to be so difficult?" I wiped my hands on a towel and looked at him. This was the moment. I had swapped the original bank documents with a modified version prepared by my lawyer. These papers did not authorize a remortgage on my inheritance. Instead, they were an acknowledgement of personal debt liability, transferring all financial responsibility for a $200,000 personal loan solely to him, using his non-existent business assets as collateral. I am sorry, Liam," I said, feigning submission. "I just wanted to be sure. But if you say it is for our future, it is." He cut in, softening his tone instantly when he saw me reach for the pen. "It is for us. Babe, just sign right there." I signed my name with a flourish. I watched him snatch the papers away, grinning like a man who had just won the lottery. He kissed my cheek, but his lips felt cold and predatory. He had no idea he had just signed away his financial freedom. 2 days later, the call came. Not to me, but to him. We were watching television when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and turned pale. It was the signal. Chloe was in labor. He jumped up, grabbing his keys. "I have to go," he stammered, putting on his jacket with frantic movements. There is a structural emergency at the downtown site. The concrete is cracking. It is a disaster." At 10 o'clock at night, I asked, keeping my voice steady, "Yes, God. Natalie, do not interrogate me right now," he yelled, rushing out the door. "Do not wait up." I watched from the window as his taillights disappeared into the rainy Seattle night. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up with a notification from my health insurance provider. Authorization request, St. Jude Hospital. Patient Chloe Vance. Procedure labor and delivery. They were doing it. They were actually walking into a hospital, checking in under my insurance policy, and pretending Chloe was a dependent to save themselves $20,000 in medical bills. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the deny button. It would be so easy to stop them right now, to leave them stranded with a massive bill. But I did not press it. I let the authorization go through. I needed the felony charge to stick. By using my benefits without my consent, they were committing insurance fraud and identity theft. I took a screenshot of the confirmation code as evidence. Then, I made my calls. First, I dialed Julian. He picked up on the second ring, sounding nervous. "She is in labor," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "St. Jude Hospital. Room 405. Be there in 1 hour. Julian." If you are late, your wife gets the photos. I can't just leave, Julian whispered, panic in his voice. 1 hour, I repeated, and hung up. Next, I called the private number of Detective Miller from the Economic Crimes Unit. We had spoken daily for the last week. They are at St. Jude, I told him. They just triggered the insurance fraud. You have the evidence of the credit card theft and the forged signatures. They are all in one room. We are mobilizing now. Miller replied, We will meet you there, Mrs. Vance. I went to my closet. I did not dress like a victim. I put on my sharpest black suit, the one I wore when I had to fire executives for embezzlement. I applied a coat of blood-red lipstick. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun. Finally, I picked up the black leather folder containing the DNA results, the fake loan papers, and the printouts of their chats. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. The woman staring back at me was not Natalie the wife. She was Natalie the Reckoning. Showtime, I whispered. I walked out into the rain, got into my car, and drove toward the hospital with the terrifying calmness of a judge on her way to read a death sentence. I was not going there to make a scene. I was going there to end them. The heavy door to room 405 swung open with a soft, pneumatic hiss. The scene inside was picture perfect, a tableau of new parenthood that would have made a greeting card photographer weep. Chloe was propped up against the pillows, her hair matted with sweat, but her face glowing with triumph. Liam was sitting on the edge of the bed, cradling a small bundle wrapped in a hospital blanket, gazing down with an expression of absolute adoration. They did not hear me enter at first. They were too wrapped up in their victory bubble. I took 3 steps into the room, my heels clicking sharply against the linoleum floor. The sound was like a gunshot in a library. Liam's head snapped up. The adoration vanished instantly, replaced by a mixture of shock and aggressive panic. He stood up, shielding the baby from my view as if I were a contagion. "What the hell are you doing here?" Liam hissed, keeping his voice low but venomous. "Get out." "Seriously, Natalie, get out right now. You are sick." Chloe shrank back against the pillows, her eyes darting between me and the door. "Liam, make her leave," she whimpered, clutching the bedsheet. I did not move. I did not blink. I stood at the foot of the bed, looking at them with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing rats in a maze. "I have every right to be here, Liam," I said, my voice smooth and eerily calm, considering every single bill for this room, the epidural, and the delivery is being charged to my insurance policy. I am just here to inspect what I paid for. I took a step closer. Liam tried to block me, his face twisting into a sneer. "You are just jealous," he spat. "You are jealous because Chloe could give me the one thing you never could, a family, a legacy. Look at him, Natalie. He is perfect. He is mine." I looked past his shoulder at the infant sleeping in his arms. The baby was indeed beautiful, innocent of the sins that had created him. I tilted my head slightly. "He is a cute baby," I admitted. "But I have a question. Whose eyes does he have, because they are certainly not yours?" Liam's face turned a violent shade of red. He stepped forward, invading my personal space, practically vibrating with rage. "How dare you!" he growled, his voice trembling with fury. "He is my son. He is my flesh and blood. Just because you are barren does not mean you get to come in here and spew your poison. This is my child." I let out a short, cold laugh. It was a dry sound, devoid of humor. "Your child," I repeated. I reached into my black leather folder and pulled out the first document. It was the medical report from the sports clinic in Chicago, yellowed slightly with age but preserved perfectly in a plastic sleeve. I tossed it onto the bed right next to Chloe's legs. "You have a short memory." "Liam," I said, "do you remember Dr. Miller? 2015. That rugby injury you told me was just a hernia. Liam stared at the file. He did not want to touch it, but compulsion took over. He shifted the baby to one arm and picked up the paper with his free hand. I watched his eyes scan the page. I watched the exact moment the words obstructive azoospermia and permanent sterility registered in his brain. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like he might faint. He stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "No," he whispered, his voice barely audible. This is wrong. This is old. It is a permanent condition. Liam, I said ruthlessly, you are shooting blanks. You have been sterile for 10 years. You cannot father a child. It is biologically impossible. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. Liam slowly turned his head to look at Chloe. His expression was no longer angry. It was a mask of pure, horrifying confusion. "Chloe," he asked, his voice cracking. "Babe, what is she talking about? Tell her she is crazy." Chloe was shaking now. Tears were streaming down her face, but they were tears of terror, not joy. "It is a lie," she shrieked, her voice shrill and desperate. She forged it, or it healed. Doctors make mistakes all the time. Liam. "It is a miracle we prayed for this a miracle," I said, nodding slowly. "That is a nice story. But miracles do not usually leave a paper trail of wire transfers." I pulled out the second set of documents, the photos of the coffee shop meeting, the emails. I dropped them on the bed like a second bomb. Miracles do not happen. "Chloe," I said, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "But sleeping with your boyfriend's wealthy brother to secure a payout, that happens every day." Liam looked from the medical file to the photos on the bed. He looked at the baby in his arms, then at Chloe, and finally back at me. The realization hit him with the force of a freight train. "Julian," he choked out, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. "My brother." The door to the hospital room swung open for the second time that night, but this time, the silence it brought was heavy enough to crush bones. Julian walked in first. He looked pale, his usually immaculate suit rumpled, his eyes fixed on the floor. But he was not alone. Behind him walked Eleanor, his wife of 12 years and the daughter of the senator who had bankrolled his entire political career. I had sent her the same photos I gave Julian, along with a polite invitation to witness the family reunion. Liam stared at his brother, the baby still cradled awkwardly in his arms. He looked like a man trying to solve a puzzle that was missing half the pieces. "Julian," Liam stammered, his voice trembling. "What are you doing here? Tell her she is crazy. Tell her this kid is mine." Julian finally looked up. He did not look at Liam. He looked at the DNA test result I had forced him to bring. He tossed the paper onto the tray table. It landed with a soft slap. "I am sorry, Liam," Julian said, his voice hollow and defeated. "It is true. The boy is mine. The DNA match is 99.9%. The sound that escaped Liam's throat was animalistic. It was a strangled gasp of pure devastation. He looked down at the infant in his arms as if the baby had suddenly turned into a snake. He recoiled, practically shoving the bundle back into Chloe's arms before stumbling backward until he hit the wall. "You." Liam pointed a shaking finger at Julian, then at Chloe. "You slept with him, my brother. You told me this was our fresh start. You told me this was my son." I had to. Chloe cried out, clutching the baby to her chest. "We needed the money." "Liam, you were broke. Julian has money." He was helping us before Liam could lunge. Eleanor stepped forward. She was a small woman, but in that moment, she looked 10 feet tall. She did not scream. She simply walked up to Julian and delivered a slap so hard it echoed off the tiled walls. Julian's head snapped to the side, a bright red mark instantly blooming on his cheek. "You are disgusting," Eleanor said. her voice like chipped ice. Do not bother coming home, Julian. The locks are already changed, and do not bother calling the bank, because my father and I have already frozen the joint assets. You are done. Julian slumped against the doorframe, holding his face, stripped of his arrogance and his fortune in a single second. The room descended into chaos. Liam, realizing his entire reality was a lie, turned his rage on Chloe. The man who had been wiping sweat from her brow 10 minutes ago was now looking at her with murderous hate. "You used me!" Liam screamed, tears streaming down his face mixed with snot and sweat. "I left my wife for you. I stole from her for you, and you were screwing him the whole time. It was just sex," Chloe yelled back, hysterical. "He meant nothing. I love you. Liam, please. We can still fix this. We have the money from the remortgage." "There is no money," I interjected, speaking for the first time since the new guests arrived. They all froze and looked at me. I was leaning against the windowsill, checking my nails. "The papers you signed yesterday," I looked at Liam. "Those were not remortgage papers. That was an acknowledgement of personal debt. You did not secure a loan against the house. You just accepted full legal liability for $200,000 of debt that does not exist. The house is mine. The car you sold is gone, and my bank accounts are empty." Liam slid down the wall, burying his face in his hands. He was broken, completely and utterly broken. Chloe, realizing her safety net had just been incinerated, turned her desperate eyes to me. She shifted the baby, trying to use motherhood as a shield. Natalie, please." She sobbed, reaching out a hand toward me. "I know I messed up. I know it looks bad, but look at him. He is just a baby. We have been best friends since we were 19. You cannot leave me like this. You cannot let me drown. Please, for the sake of our friendship." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had eaten at my table, laughed at my jokes, and then plotted to leave me destitute. I felt absolutely nothing. "Best friends," I asked softly. "Best friends do not sleep with your husband, Chloe. Best friends do not steal your identity to commit insurance fraud. And best friends certainly do not laugh about destroying your life over the phone." I turned toward the open door and nodded. "Gentlemen," I said, "they are all yours." Detective Miller walked in, followed by 2 uniformed officers. The atmosphere in the room shifted from emotional tragedy to legal reality. The badge on Miller's belt caught the harsh hospital light. "Liam Vance. Chloe Miller," the detective announced, his voice booming. "You are both under arrest for identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and insurance fraud in the first degree. You have the right to remain silent." As the officers moved in to handcuff Liam, who was sobbing uncontrollably, and approached Chloe's bed to detain her, I picked up my black folder. The air in the room was thick with the smell of ruin. But to me, it smelled like fresh rain. The audit was complete. The balance was 0. The click of the handcuffs around Liam's wrists was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard, sweeter than any symphony. He was thrashing against the officers, his face twisted in a mix of panic and disbelief. "This is a setup," Liam screamed, his voice cracking. "She planned this. She tricked me into signing those papers. You cannot arrest me for being a bad husband. I want a lawyer. You are not being arrested for being a bad husband." "Liam," I said, stepping forward calmly, "you are being arrested for felony fraud." I pulled my phone from my pocket and pressed play on the audio file I had saved 5 months ago. The room went silent as Liam's own voice, tinny but unmistakable, drifted from the speaker. "Just wait until that idiot signs the remortgage papers next week. We will have enough cash to vanish." Liam froze. The blood drained from his face until he looked like a corpse. He realized then that I had known everything, every smile, every dinner, Every moment of the last 5 months had been a lie I performed to lead him to this exact moment. On the bed, Chloe was sobbing into her hands. A female officer was standing guard beside her. The baby, the innocent pawn in their twisted game, had been taken by a nurse to the nursery. Eleanor, Julian's wife, looked at the empty bassinet with cold indifference. "I will not be taking that child," Eleanor stated firmly to the social worker who had just arrived. "And neither will Julian. Put him in the system." "He is not my problem." Julian stood in the corner, head bowed, his political career effectively over before the sun even rose. I turned my attention back to Liam. "Oh, and about those papers you signed," I said, leaning in close so only he could hear the fatality of my words. "You did not sign a remortgage on my house. The house is safe. It belongs to me, just like it always has. You signed a voluntary assumption of personal debt. You now owe the bank $200,000. Liam. And since you have no job and no assets, good luck paying that off from a prison cell?" Liam's knees buckled. The officers had to physically hold him up. But the car. He whispered, grasping for anything. "We can sell the Porsche." "The vintage Porsche?" I asked, feigning surprise. "The one you loved more than you ever loved me. I sold it this morning at 8 o'clock. Since the title was in my name. It was a legal sale. I donated the entire $45,000 to a shelter for women who have been victims of domestic financial abuse. They were very grateful for your contribution." A guttural wail ripped from Liam's throat. He had lost his freedom, his reputation, his brother, his lover, his imaginary son, and even his beloved car. He was stripped bare. "Get them out of here," Detective Miller ordered as they dragged Liam out of the room. He was weeping like a child, begging for a second chance that would never come. Chloe looked at me one last time as the nurse prepared to move her to the secure ward. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Nat," she croaked. "Please." I did not blink. I adjusted the lapels of my tailored blazer, smoothed my hair, and turned my back on her without a word. She did not deserve my anger. She certainly did not deserve my pity. She was already a ghost to me. I walked out of the hospital main entrance. The storm that had raged all night had finally broken. The rain had stopped, and the air was crisp and clean, smelling of wet pavement and absolute freedom. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the oxygen of a new life. I pulled out my phone and dialed my boss. "Hey, Natalie, it is 3 in the morning." He answered, sounding groggy. "I know," I said, smiling at the empty street. "I am just calling to let you know that the personal audit I was working on is closed. The books are balanced, and I will be taking my vacation time starting tomorrow. I booked a one-way ticket to Bali." "Bali? That sounds expensive," he chuckled. "Do not worry," I replied, looking back at the grim hospital building one last time. "I am paying for it with the money my ex-husband tried to steal." I hung up and walked toward my car. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But I have found that revenge is best served with a court summons and a DNA test result. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to hear your thoughts. So please comment down below and let me know where you are tuning in. From I love connecting with you all if you enjoyed this story. Please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people. See you in the next one,